A father's story. I still remember the exact moment that message appeared on my phone. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind of morning where the world feels half asleep. I was sitting on the porch, sipping my tea, watching the sunlight crawl slowly across the lawn. My wife had gone to visit her sister for a few days, so the house was unusually silent. I missed my son that morning. It had been weeks since he last visited. The last time we talked, he mentioned that he and Sarah, his fiancée, were planning their wedding soon. Soon, Dad, he had said, smiling through a video call. We're just figuring out the date. That, soon, kept echoing in my head. Every time I passed his childhood room, now empty but still full of memories, trophies, school photos, an old guitar. I imagined how wonderful it would be to see him walking down the aisle, hand in hand with the girl he loved. I wanted to dance at his wedding, even if I had 2 left feet. I wanted to see my wife tear up with joy. I wanted to see family, friends, music, laughter. All the things a father dreams of when his only son is about to start a new life. So that morning, without thinking too much, I picked up my phone and sent a message to Sarah. Chua. Hey dear, when's the wedding? I smiled as I hit send, expecting some excited reply. Maybe next month. Or, well, tell you soon. But what came next froze me in place. Chua. We got married yesterday. I stared at the screen, the words burning into my eyes. I read them once, twice, 3 times, as if they'd change into something else. They didn't. I put my cup down slowly. My hands were trembling. My heart began to race, not out of anger, not even out of sadness at first, but confusion. Yesterday, without us, without anyone. I scrolled up, thinking maybe she meant something else. But the message was clear, final, simple. Chua. Got married yesterday. No emojis. No explanation. Just those words, honest and soft, yet heavy enough to silence the whole world. I sat there for a long time. The sunlight moved from the lawn to the porch, and then to my lap, but I couldn't move. I felt like time had stopped. Like a chapter of my life had closed without warning. 1,000 thoughts ran through my head. Had I said something wrong? Had I not been the father my son needed? Did they think we wouldn't approve? Or was it just their way? Quiet, simple, private. I didn't know, and the not knowing hurt the most. To that evening, I sat at the dining table, staring at my phone. I thought about calling him, but every time I tried, my throat tightened. What would I say? Why didn't you tell me? Why wasn't I there? Instead, I just stared at his contact photo. My son smiling at me in his graduation gown. I remembered the day that photo was taken. He had looked so proud, and I had felt even prouder. And now, I couldn't even see his wedding. 2 hours passed. The sun went down. The house grew darker and quieter. And then my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Sarah. A photo. I opened it, and there they were, standing under a small tree, the same oak tree from the park near their old college, holding hands, smiling softly. She wore a simple white dress, no veil, no bouquet. He wore a plain shirt, no suit, no tie. Just 2 rings, shining faintly in the golden sunset. And beneath the photo, she had written, "We didn't need a crowd, we just needed love." I stared at that line for a long time. Something inside me, something tight and heavy, began to loosen. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't the wedding I'd imagined all my life. But there was something beautiful in that simplicity, something pure, something deeply real. They looked happy. Truly happy. To the next morning, I drove to the park, the one from the photo. I recognized the oak tree right away. The ground was still scattered with petals. tiny white flowers that must have fallen from her bouquet. There were 2 sets of footprints in the grass, leading away together. I stood there for a long time, looking at that tree, and for the first time, I smiled, because I realized something. Love doesn't always need witnesses. Sometimes it just needs 2 souls who understand each other completely. A few days later, my son called. His voice was hesitant. "Dad, I know we should have told you. I'm sorry." There was silence on both ends for a few seconds. Then he said quietly, "We just wanted something peaceful. No drama, no pressure, just us." I took a deep breath. "Were you happy?" "Yes," he said instantly. "The happiest I've ever been." That was all I needed to hear. I smiled. "Then that's all that matters, son." He didn't speak for a few seconds. I could hear him trying to hold back his tears. Then he whispered, "Thank you, Dad." After we hung up, I sat quietly for a long time. I realized that sometimes love doesn't shout, it whispers. And sometimes those whispers carry more meaning than 1,000 celebrations. Weeks later, they came to visit. When Sarah stepped inside our home, she hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry we didn't tell you, Dad," she whispered. And in that moment, I realized she already was part of our family. Even without a wedding, without an audience. I looked at her ring, then at my son's. They weren't expensive, but they shone with something far richer. Devotion. We sat together that evening, laughing, sharing dinner, looking through photos. They showed me their small ceremony, the tree, the rings, the handwritten vows. Each photo carried the warmth of something genuine. 2 hearts promising forever in the simplest way possible. And as I watched them, hand in hand, I felt proud, not of the ceremony, but of the love they'd built. That night, after they left, I went out to the porch again. The moon was bright and the wind was gentle. I thought about all the things I'd wanted for my son, the big wedding, the music, the guests, and I smiled. Because maybe he didn't need all that. Maybe he only needed love. And in the end, that's all any of us really need. A month passed. Life went back to its quiet rhythm. But every time I walked by that photo on the mantel, the one of them under the oak tree, my heart filled with a soft kind of peace. I still sometimes imagine what the big wedding might have looked like. The laughter, the music, the dance. But then I remember that photo, and I know the beauty of that day wasn't in the size of the celebration, but in the depth of their love. Because love, in its truest form, doesn't need an audience. It just needs 2 people who see the world the same way. And that's exactly what my son found. A few weeks after their visit, I found myself missing them again. The house had gone back to its silence, the same familiar stillness that echoes through every parent's home after their children move out. But this time, the silence didn't hurt as much. It felt peaceful. I often sat in the living room, looking at their picture under that oak tree. I had framed it myself. There was something sacred about that photograph. Like it captured not just their faces, but the heartbeat of their love. Still, sometimes late at night, I'd catch myself wondering, would it have been different if we had been there? Would my wife have cried with joy? Would there have been music, laughter, lights? Maybe. But then again, maybe that simplicity was what made it beautiful. While letter in the drawer one morning, as I was cleaning my desk, I found an old envelope tucked beneath some papers. It was a letter my son had written years ago, back when he'd left for college. "Dad, you've always been my hero. I know we don't say it much, but you've taught me what love looks like. How it's patient, quiet, and strong." I sat back, reading it slowly. My throat tightened. Maybe that was why he chose the quiet path. Maybe, in his own way, he was living the very love I'd shown him all along. Calm, deep, and honest. I smiled softly. You learned well, son, I whispered. The dinner that changed everything. A month later, my wife returned home after visiting her sister. She had no idea about the wedding yet. I hadn't told her. Maybe I was waiting for the right time. Maybe I was still trying to find the right words. When I finally told her, over dinner, just the two of us, she froze. Her spoon dropped gently into the bowl. What do you mean they got married already? I nodded quietly. They did it their way. Small, peaceful. Tears filled her eyes. Without us. I reached across the table, holding her hand. They didn't mean to hurt us. They just wanted something simple. She wiped her tears and whispered, but we're their parents. We should have been there. I didn't have an answer. Just silence, heavy and honest. That night I showed her the photo Sarah had sent. At first, she just stared. Then her lips began to tremble, and finally a small smile appeared. They look happy, she whispered. I nodded. Yes, happier than I've ever seen them. And then, slowly, she smiled through her tears. Then I guess that's enough. Batu, a visit to remember. 2 weeks later, they came home again. This time, my wife had cooked everything. Biryani, kheer, chicken roast. The kind of meal that fills the whole house with warmth. When Sarah walked in, my wife hugged her tightly. I should scold you, she said with a laugh through tears, but I can't. You look too happy. Sarah smiled shyly. We just wanted something peaceful, Mom. And that was it. All the hurt melted away in that one word, Mom. That evening, as we all sat together, laughter, stories, I realized that love has a way of mending things without even trying. Before leaving, my son handed me a small box. Inside was a photo album. Their wedding day. Every little moment captured by a friend. There were pictures of them writing their vows, laughing as the wind tangled her hair, exchanging rings under that oak tree, and finally, holding each other as the sun went down. On the last page, there was a note written in my son's handwriting. Dad, we may not have had a crowd, but you were there, in everything we are. I closed the album slowly, my heart full. Sometimes blessings don't need to be spoken aloud. Sometimes they just flow silently, like light through leaves. And that night, as I watched them drive away, I whispered the words I hadn't said before. God bless you both. The oak tree promise. Months turned into a year. Seasons came and went, and so did birthdays, anniversaries, and quiet Sunday calls. My son and Sarah had built a small home in the suburbs. Sometimes they'd visit, sometimes we'd visit them. Every time we met, it felt warmer, like a family stitched together with quiet forgiveness and deep love. But one day, he called with a new kind of excitement in his voice. Dad, he said breathlessly, we have something to tell you. I smiled. What's that? There was a pause, and then Sarah's soft voice came through. You're going to be a grandfather? For a moment, I couldn't speak. My eyes blurred. The world went quiet except for my heartbeat. A grandfather, I repeated softly. Really? They both laughed. Yes, Dad. Really? I leaned back, smiling through tears. Then I guess it's time to plant another tree. A circle of love. 9 months later, we were all back at that same park, under the same oak tree. This time, Sarah sat on a picnic blanket, holding their newborn daughter. My son was beside her, feeding the baby gently. I stood a few steps away watching. The sunlight falling through the branches, just like that day in the photo. They'd named her Grace, and she was perfect. My wife sat beside Sarah, rocking the baby, whispering prayers. And I realized everything had come full circle. That oak tree had seen their beginning. Now, it watched as their love grew into something even greater. A family. 2. The lesson I learned as I watched them that day, I finally understood something that had taken me a lifetime to learn. Love isn't about ceremonies or photographs or grand speeches. It's about the quiet moments, the laughter shared, the forgiveness given, the memories built without needing applause. I used to think I'd miss their wedding. But I hadn't. Because marriage isn't just one day. It's every day after that. Every sunrise they share, every hand they hold, every smile they give. And I had been there for all of it. In spirit, in heart, in love. Final scene years later, when I grew older and slower, my son would often visit me. We'd sit together on the same porch where I once read that fateful message. We got married yesterday. Now, we'd watch little Grace running around the yard, her laughter echoing through the house like sunlight on water. And sometimes, my son would look at me and say, "Dad, I'm sorry we didn't tell you before." I'd just smile. Don't be. You gave me something better? You gave me proof that love doesn't need witnesses to be real. He'd nod quietly, eyes glistening. Then I'd add with a grin, "Just promise me one thing. When Grace grows up, tell her to invite me to her wedding." He'd laugh. Deal. And in that laughter, shared between a father and his son, I felt peace, because love had come full circle, and everything was exactly as it should be. Kupilog now, when I visit that oak tree, I see 3 generations. My son, his wife, their child, standing beneath its shade, their laughter carried by the wind. Sometimes I close my eyes and whisper, we didn't need a crowd. We just needed love. And every time, I feel that same warmth, the kind that doesn't fade even after years, because love, once planted, grows forever.